Alex Answer here with another Liberty Intelligence podcast. That's kind of why I like to call these with Kyle Reardon. We're literally applying our intelligence to what is taking place in the Liberty movement. Kyle, welcome.
It's good to be back on with you, Alex.
So here we are. It is the 30th day of November. I know that you're working on your own projects, but what are your thoughts? Your initial thoughts. Here we are, several weeks after the election. Some could say the selection of Donald Trump.
Well, I'm really looking forward to both, roughly about December 19th or so when the Electoral College actually chooses the president. And then, of course, we won't find out the results of that until roughly about early January, just about a few weeks right before the inauguration, mainly because in the Constitution, it says that the Electoral College, in Article 2, Section 1, that the Electoral College chooses the president, not the American people vis-a-vis a popular vote, as well as the fact that last election cycle, when it was Romney versus Obama, the U.S. Congress in joint session actually opens up the Electoral College votes in full view of everyone, and people can actually go look at the archived footage on C-SPAN. And I think that footage was dated, January 3rd, 2013. So it was right before, it's just fascinating, Alex, that a lot of people in the corporate media basically, I think you saw this too, where they were trying to call it for Hillary. I think there were some stories about that, on November 8th. And all I was thinking is, okay, so everyone's just disregarding the Electoral College apparently. So, if people just keep in mind that the electors actually have autonomy to choose who they want for president. And, it's interesting. The electors who actually buck the political parties are known as faithless electors. And it's legal for them to do that. So, while it's true that it would seem to be the case that more likely than not, Trump is probably going to be it. I don't know, man. Faithless electors could still swing it. But admittedly, it's probably a long shot.
Right. So not only did the election divide people, there's a sense of uncertainty, more so than any other election cycle, not only strife within the population, but complete confusion as to what's coming next, as we can see aspects of the mainstream media and, what's self-identified to be the supposed freedom-loving left media. Yes, they're all discussing this. Don't give up hope. Don't stop fighting. And so because of these tactics also, it continues to make Trump more popular. And there's also other things that have come out on the other side to where, and we'll talk about fake news as well, everybody protesting against Donald Trump, for example, in Portland, has been called a Soros-paid agitator. And we're going to try to, separate truth versus fiction here in this podcast, but there is such a real thing as a real protest. Even if somebody may not agree with their potential picks or president, some of the people did not vote for Hillary. And there are some anarchists that live in Portland, and that's part of the Portland culture, is that you vocally demonstrate, you get loud about the fact that you're not choosing a master. Now, we may have a political disagreement on blocking traffic, but there are anarchist cultures that do believe that screaming and shouting about not picking a master is how you tell others that you did not pick a master. And so that is an aspect of our culture, like it or not. I'm saying that to the listeners. And not everybody's being paid by George Soros. And so I think those really are dangerous conspiracy theories that can really lead certain people to be marginalized as extremists, as those pushing Russian propaganda talking points. So let's talk about that, because you've seen websites that you're associated with or have supported or have done podcasts on attacked, as have I. I'm even posting news for a person that's been labeled Russian propaganda. Meanwhile, I don't really see them going after the real fake news. They keep saying that all these websites help Donald Trump, but if Donald Trump was hypothetically selected by the system, then that's not really the truth. In reality, those websites help steer a narrative in reality, like building upon the popular consensus reality. Not so much voting, but getting people to think in that state of consciousness. And what I believe we can see is Facebook's promotion of the fake news that is believed to have sent people in the direction of Donald. Meaning, the entire time when people were saying the establishment only hated Donald Trump and that the establishment loved Clinton, my perspective from my Facebook feed, when we know that they manipulate the feeds, was completely opposite. It was, oh my God, Clinton, the demon. And it just got so obscure and the tabloid stuff. It was like dead alien found in Roswell, the whore of Babylon, and then like Donald Trump's like rising out of the water. I'm like, wait a minute, Facebook isn't really showing me anti-Trump posts. Facebook is showing me pro-Trump posts. And if Facebook was really accurately trying to give me news and information based on my search history, based on my genuine interests, it would not be propagandizing me and telling me what Trump is saying on Twitter. And so I just said a lot there, and I could say more, but I'm going to end there. I have seen social media do nothing but hate on Clinton and promote Trump. And so that doesn't make me a Clinton plant for seeing a pattern and being able to identify what AI is doing. And AI helped promote Trump. That's what I see. Or the algorithm.
Well, I mean, let's look at some of Trump's promises, or at least one of them. It's rather fascinating, Alex, that the guy isn't even sworn in as president yet he's already backpedaling on his campaign promises. And for those people who may not remember what happened with Obama, one of his campaign administrators or press secretaries or whatever mentioned that, it was just campaign rhetoric. That was the phrase that was used. So don't count on these politicians following through on any of their promises. This is just a standing rule of American politics. So when Trump promised during the primaries last year that should he be elected, he will appoint a special prosecutor who will in turn go after Hillary Clinton primarily about the emails, right? That was the promise that was made. People can verify what I've said and pull that footage up. And apparently now that he's, at least for the time being, won the popular vote, it would seem to be the case that he's now said he will basically not do any of that because we need to move on as a country. There was all sorts of other rhetoric about we need to renegotiate the deals with China or something to that effect. People can also look that up as well. And so all I'm simply saying is that it's amazing. He doesn't even have the job yet, and yet in some ways he's acting very presidential. And so this is just a recurring feature of the system. And so when people have said, and you've pointed this out too before, that Trump is allegedly this anti-establishment candidate, he's already breaking promises and he doesn't even have the job yet.
Sure. Let's read this real quick. I mentioned the meme that's been put out there that Trump is anti-Fed. And so here's a headline here. Trump meets with ex-bank CEO to abolish the Fed. And the source for this is Business Insider. It reads, as President-elect Trump's transition rolls on, more and more attention is being paid to possible selections. And so, again, we have also a comparison between a bank CEO who is purportedly anti-Fed. So, Trump has, on the campaign trail, questioned the future of the Fed's independence. But Allison takes that rhetoric a step further. While running the Cato Institute, Allison wrote a paper in support of abolishing the Fed. So I just got to say, being someone that's talked about one of those one world government types, hey, if you're going to end the Fed, you have to have something to replace it with. Otherwise, you'll end up with another system based on some of the same aspects of control. And it may not even seem like it's, the same kind of a system. Here we have people that are like pro-Russia, pro-New World Order, pro-SDR, new global currency, just because they don't like the dollar. So I saw something like this happening 4 or 5 years ago, and that's what Trump is reminding me of, this type of deception that I thought would always really come. I'm not saying that we really are going to see the Fed abolished. I think that's a good example, though, of how he's catering to that crowd. And then we're seeing the propagandists for Trump that really want to be at inauguration. I mean, they're dead serious. They're literally having a brain orgasm. they're literally having these fantasies of having steak dinner And we're seeing pictures of him, like the Don, like the Gotti, the mafia head of the Genovese family in New York City. They're very popular. Teflon Don, Gotti, John Gotti. And I see them playing up this John Gotti thing with Trump as well. I see pictures of him shoving his face at some steak dinner. Then, of course, we have the Donald assassination meme. So, guaranteed they're like, okay, well, they're going to kill the dude. And to me, I'm looking at this like, well, wow, okay, well, I don't know if we've seen a major high-profile staged fake shooting, but I would assume that Trump would be in on something like that because of the role that he's playing. Oh, you're going to come shake things up. You're outside the establishment, and then you just so happen to line up your cabinet with these psycho ex-Bush neocons, both male and female. You have this lady, it looks like she's possessed by the devil, who's like the transportation secretary. Miss Chow something. I'm not attacking her because she's Chinese, but take a look at her picture. She's got that Rockefeller type of, there's nobody home. So he's surrounded himself with these freaks that seem to be well positioned. If something were to happen to the Donald, and so we have, and this might just be another thing with hysteria. Like they said they were going to kill Ron Paul. I even think there was all this hysteria about they were going to kill Obama, and so this might just be hysteria to just play up that Trump is JFK. JFK is Trump over and over and over and over again. And it's so sad that people keep doing this, to the spirit of JFK. They did it with Obama. They compared Obama to JFK and Lincoln and others. And people criticize the left for that. And what the right's doing is they're doing the exact same thing with just, it is Coke and Pepsi.
Yes, very much so. And, people should really kind of ask themselves, will the Donald seriously try and shrink the power of the federal government? And quite frankly, there is absolutely no reason to believe that. As I've written before in my articles, one of which would be electoral psyop, I think it's more than fair to say that Donald Trump is the reincarnation of Alexander Hamilton. That American school of economics, which is just a regurgitation of mercantilism that was practiced in Europe. And one of those planks of the American school was that you have to have a national or central bank. So, all the evils that Dr. Murray Rothbard and the Austrian school of economics very much heavily emphasize about the evils of central banking and the artificial business cycle and so forth that it generates, is Donald Trump's just kind of it's doing that all over again. Hamilton was the same way. Even James Madison the father of the Constitution, was very forceful in his writings, rebuking Hamilton, saying that a central bank is unconstitutional and such. So, people really don't understand their history. They really don't understand the disagreements that the founders have with each other about the nature and use of political power. So when they look to a contemporary strongman archetype like the Donald, it's basically showing that they don't care about freedom at all in any manner, and that they really just would prefer to live in the equivalent of like the stereotypical African third world cesspit, where you're essentially dealing with gangs, roving gangs that either act like a government, or if they actually do get in the government, they do things like forms of torture that are like suspension for people who understand, involving the use of hooks into the pectoral muscles and such. So it's very much, now it may not get necessarily to that degree, but correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, didn't Trump say during the campaign he was very much in favor of reinvigorating waterboarding?
Yes, he said quite a bit during the campaign. That was one of them.
Okay, so there's that. There was also the other quote, something, and not many people emphasize this. John Oliver did a good job of bringing it up, but apparently Trump at one point said that he wants to not only keep Guantanamo Bay open, but he wants to, quote, fill it with a lot of bad dudes. Now, anybody that understands what's been happening in Guantanamo Bay, whether you love it or hate it, understands that there's some serious legal issues at play, constitutional issues even. So, that going into the war on terror and neoconservatism and all of that. So really, when you mentioned that Donald Trump is essentially putting in neocons into his cabinet during this transitionary period, I gotta say, man, I'm not completely surprised, because basically everything that he's said, everything that he's done, and everything that he seems to still be doing today is basically he's reinvigorating the war on terror. He's basically grabbing all these Bush Jr. appointees. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Petraeus tapped to be Secretary of State?
Yes. I'm bringing up the headline right now, but there's a number of individuals that are being considered for that position, including Giuliani and Romney. And I'm just going to mention a few other headlines that I have archived over on the news section of amtvmedia.com. Just click on the news tab. Trump chooses Elaine Chao to be Transportation Secretary, and she served under the Bush administration. Other things regarding Donald Trump: Trump calls for jailing and revoking citizenship of flag burners. In addition to that, we have Trump tapping conservative Republican, I believe his name is Stalwarts, to cabin. If I read that correct, or at least that's rather Tom Price. Trump taps conservative Republican Tom Price to cabinet. Trump to launch Thank You Tour with Thursday rally in Cincinnati. And when I saw that, some thoughts came to mind about that being a potential for a stage assassination. Why would you be so public after you've caused so much civil unrest? That would be very, very suspicious of future public events and any attempts by Trump to be public with the crowd. I think that actually might provide to me, it just makes me more concerned he's going to play a role in some sort of stage assassination. Again, moving on, Trump meets with ex-bank CEO to abolish the Fed. Top Trump ally, Matt Drudge, Alex Jones, played key roles in electing Trump. And see, the way I'm interpreting that, that's pouring gasoline on an already bad situation to where there's a witch hunt for fake news. And innocent, even left-leaning websites, I think Truth Dig and maybe Truth Out and a few other websites that are known to be left-leaning truther websites, they have been attacked as well. Trump to completely sever ties with his business. That's today from the Daily Caller. Former Goldman Sachs banker is confirmed to be a U.S. Treasury Secretary, and the name of him is Steve Munich. Trump to announce carrier plant to keep jobs in the United States. Meanwhile, U.S. Marines in a war game drill on the Russian-Norway border, as the United States and China are engaged in a joint disaster relief drill. As the U.S. military, almost done here, gears up for a space war, as it's revealed that Trump has dumped his stock in the Dakota Access Pipeline. So, wrapping up my points on this. It's all in the eye of the beholder, whether some things are positive or negative, like all things in this world, as it is with the Donald. Here we see headlines that indicate on one level, anti-Fed. Hey, he's a good guy. He dumped his stock in the Dakota Access. Yeah, that sounds like insider trading from another perspective. He's lined up his cabinet with neocons that are absolutely anything but people that would represent a non-foreign policy, interventionist foreign policy. So we have enough information that one person can look at Donald Trump a certain way, and another person can look at Donald Trump a certain way, and people just not get it. So what I want to say was I don't want my predictions to come true about Donald Trump leading us to World War III, about a Muslim database. Because if I am right about that as well, it's going to lead to a blowback. It's going to lead to World War III and a case being built against America. And I'm also not opposed to the idea that Trump will be a 4-year president, one term, to really fuck things up. In particular, we look at the Fed. Of course, they'll just blame it on Janet Yellen. But in reality, they probably would be working together. Okay, Trump comes in. He does some positive things. Part of my prediction, he's going to do some really popular things that's going to make him look like a fucking god. to these people that are under the spell. Like a bomb, like he's going in directions like he's really going to change something, you know? And so it's going to just pour more gasoline on the narrative. They're going to kill him. They're going to kill him. They're going to kill him. And that's all I'm seeing right now. He's going to come in and he's going to change some things, and they're going to straight up kill him. And then from then it's going to be on. And that is scary because there's a lot of predictive programming for this. You know, even in that video game, Shattered Union, you know, to where, you know, one of the most unpopular presidents is elected in U.S. history in this 2005 video game trailer called Shattered Union. And then it shows Washington, D.C. being nuked shortly afterwards. I am concerned that they're going to build a genocide pact. Donald Trump, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, and that they're going to be going after key areas in the Middle East. And it seems like they're already calling for this new world order, you know, restored relations between the Russian government and the United States. But it really seems kind of sick because here you have the U.S. funding ISIS on the ground, and now you have the world applauding Russian airstrikes. And you've been with me for like months. We've talked about this, and it's getting bigger now. This is going to be a big deal for Russia to be applauded as it blows shit up around the Middle East, as the U.S. sets them up, just like what they did to the Afghans. So what I'm interpreting is like a global white supremacy movement through the U.S., Russian, and that's not what people are seeing. Instead, they're attacking the bloggers, you know. Instead, people are being targeted with fake news, you know. So some of them that have hateful inclinations deep down inside of them, it's like Trump is helping bring that out. Unfortunately, there's no honest dialogue about this across even within our own peoples, not just the left or the right. There's no breaking bread and coming to the table. You know, that even Facebook is working with the fake news websites to create the racial hysteria. Instead, the narrative is that Facebook is with the social justice warriors. I call bullshit on that one, Kyle. I don't think that Facebook is with they're with the civil unrest crowd. Oh yes, just promote this, but they have been very instrumental in the demonization of the Middle Eastern human. So I don't see them as real social justice warriors, I guess, but they seem to be playing that role. And I just see that as a deception. Really, we see really a neocon Facebook, I think. You know, censoring 9/11 truth-related posts from the trending section while allowing the other stuff to go on.
Well, as far as I can tell regarding Fascist Book, you know, Fascist Book seems to kind of enable both, actually. It basically enables people with a very partisan... So, you know, if we were like in 2014 and even last year, I would say that the social justice stuff where everything is sexist, everything's racist, everything's homophobic or transphobic, which was the newest version, even when it's not, I mean, the Matt Taylor incident, you know, was pretty important, I think. I mean, Vox Day wrote an entire book on how not to lose your job, but still do the pushback against the SJWs. But I would agree with you to the extent that the neocon type stuff has been really prolific. I would say probably last year and a half or so. For instance, maybe many people may not remember this, but last year, before the fiasco in Oregon, John Ritzheimer actually did some videos in support of something called the Global Rally for Humanity. And remember, this guy's supposed to be a patriot, right? He's supposed to be a nationalist. But yet, while waving the American flag in the background, he was saying something to the effect of, and I'm paraphrasing, we need to stand with our brothers in Australia and Britain who are pushing back against this Islamic threat. Now think about that for a second. You have a guy who's supposed to be a constitutionalist, somebody who is supposed to be like America first, right? But then saying about our brothers in these other countries... I'm sorry, did anybody notice the switch? Or is it just me? So kind of like how Trump was, like I said earlier, was promising, I'm going to get Hillary, I'm going to get Hillary, I'm going to get Hillary. No, I'm not going to get Hillary. Then you have somebody like Ritzheimer who is America, America, America. Oh, but then mentioning these foreigners. So that what I'm saying is that there's no consistency with any of this crap. So when you have someone like you or someone like me come along later and point this stuff out, and then people get upset when we just simply point out the inconsistencies of these people's stories, I think that's where a lot of the reason why there's a lot of vitriol against anybody who simply tries to point out that there's been a change in policy, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely. And this tone of nationalism, white nationalism, that exists in Russia and the United States, and the parallels. So that's the importance of having, I think, a real critical eye towards Russia. And in this day and age where you really do have information warriors, keyboard warriors, also known as trolls, but, people that are actually that work full time to push certain narratives. Just because innocent people are being targeted by some of these smears doesn't mean that some of the websites on some of those lists were innocent. Some of them actually were fake news websites. So I think the point that I'm trying to get at, you're talking about the narrative. Are people worldwide? There was a report from Pro or Not, and they were the ones that drew up the list of 200. I should have sent this to you earlier. They also put together a PDF that goes on for like 30 pages, which explains their thinking. And even though we're looking at this and we're calling it propaganda, if someone does have a little bit of objectivity when they read the report, and there's stuff there that I've actually noticed myself that I believe to be true, to where there's actually like groups of websites that are echoing the same talking points. So on one level, yes, you have we're being invaded, our people worldwide, we're white genocide, we're becoming extinct. You have a number of websites that will be echoing that talking point. You'll have a number of websites that are Putin stands up against the globalism, and there was there's New World Order and there's globalization, but a statement was made in one of those reports that you'll often see globalism as a specific word. And Kyle, I don't know if you have used globalism, that specific version of the word globalization, but it really got me thinking. That's a very good point they're making. When they say that certain syndicates of news will put out the same word, and it'll be coming straight from the Kremlin, and it'll come within days of the Kremlin or Putin saying, we're tired of your globalism. Instead of New World Order or what's really going on. And he may say New World Order or globalization, but it'll just be that one spin on the word. And then I'll notice others, won't get into names, and it's like, oh my God, it's almost as if they're coming out and saying, yes, we actually are Russian agents. And so I don't support the McCarthyism, witch hunt that's now taking place, neo-McCarthyism, because innocent people are being targeted. However, what are these people doing? Unconsciously echoing the Kremlin talking points, literally line for line. So what I'm saying is, even though propaganda or not, pro or not for short, for people that want to look up their PDF, even though they're targeting innocent people and they've got a witch hunt, they're using truth to make their argument. It's just that they're targeting innocent people. So the truth of their argument is that there really are websites out there that are mirroring the same talking points, that are not doing genuine research, that are using some of the same keywords. The reality is a lot of people are in the clickbait Google AdSense matrix. And what they've realized is that Google and YouTube have rewarded them for their endeavors. And so I'm just going to complete this one point here and hand it over to you. This is one of two things is going to happen from the site, the blacklisting, the list. Either the websites will become demonetized, or those websites, just like Alex Jones is getting his name dropped, Matt Drudge and Alex Jones are to credit for the election. Some of these people that are on this list are literally hoping to be at the inauguration with Donald Trump. They're literally in that state of consciousness that for the first time in their life, they're literally worshiping the president instead of hating the president. And I think that on a subconscious level, they think they're healing from this because they really don't want to always hate someone. They want a great white hope. And so on a subconscious level, and this isn't a racist rant, and not all white people think this way, but some apparently do, to where they see a Putin-Trump alliance. And they have this hope that it's going to stabilize what they believe is this white genocide epidemic. And in the end, through that type of greedy thinking, I've warned and I've said that I think Trump's going to end up backstabbing the very people that he helped support, that helped support him. And so one of two things is going to happen. They're going to blacklist the websites and demonetize them, or they're going to find themselves rewarded for their endeavors.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of how things turned out. And, it's interesting. You mentioned about Putin. I remember a few years ago during the Ukrainian Revolution, there was some controversy, even in libertarian circles, about, should we support the Russians kind of thing. And, it got so bad that even when I was interviewed about it, a question came up about, do I support Putin? And I very vociferously said, look, I don't support Putin or any of these other, jokers who falsely imagine themselves to be our rulers, whether they be foreign or domestic. So, I know there was this kind of narrative a while back that somehow Putin is against globalism. But it's like, on what basis? I mean, look, anybody who understands Russia's even domestic political situation knows they're not exactly a bastion of liberty by any measure, okay? Which would, of course, be its own topic for another time. So, the enemy of my enemy is not always my friend. Sometimes they're just another enemy.
Exactly. I think we're summing this up quite well, because there are people that are literally going, what's wrong with you people? Why are you saying you're anti-establishment, but you're echoing the talking points of these demigods? That's just weird. Mm-hmm. And so there are people that are they're just not under the spell. And I always say, I don't want to get too supernatural with it, but I'll tell you what, yeah, there's something going on regarding the spell. And the same thing happened with Obama, with that spell. And there's some people, hey, they woke from the spell after a few months, but hey, sorry, too little too late. We're already in it now. Get a helmet. You're going to need it. And so here we are 8 years later, same type of scenario. Here's a helmet. You're going to need it. Oh, yeah. People are going, I regret my vote. But like I said, I predict not only some bad things down the line, but that in the initial stages, we're going to see like this reality TV show, The Dawn. It's going to be like, it's going to be like a cocaine party or something. Honestly, like bring out the 1980s music, bring out the Hairspray, bring out Motley Crue, bring out the hookers. It's going to be a little bit of debauchery here for a few months and a little bit of nonsense. Might go on for a year, party on daddy's credit card. And then stuff's going to get real. So yeah, I don't think Donald's going to come fall out right away. I think some people are probably, gosh, I want to know what some people are thinking. I really want to know and get inside their head. Like, do you realize what's going on here? Or are you saying what you're saying because Google is making you a friggin' millionaire for some reason because you're playing the game? How can you fall into this? And if this is mind control, and being that I already have an interest in discussing things like Archons, what more do I have to learn about spellcasting from this? How deep does this rabbit hole go?
Yeah, exactly. And, actually, I think there's one quote I would like to read that I think is relevant here. Both of us have been mentioning about, Trump being the strong man and people cleaving to that, even people who used to be anti-establishment now kind of switching sides, at least from appearances. Etienne de la Boétie centuries ago wrote about the politics of obedience, and I think this one observation of his I think is rather relevant. Quote, "From all these indignities, such as the very beasts of the field would not endure, you can deliver yourselves if you try, not by taking action, but merely by willing to be free. Resolve to serve no more, and you are at once freed. I do not ask that you place hands upon the tyrant to topple him over, but simply that you support him no longer, that you will behold him like a great colossus whose pedestal has been pulled away, fall of its own weight and break into pieces." Close quote. And so, yeah, people kind of really recognize that these archons or rulers really are just different colossi, and really just kind of recognize, you know what, maybe we shouldn't support them. Maybe we shouldn't be saying how these are the, it's the great man fallacy, actually, is what it really is. It's literally illogical to say that, oh, this man or that man is going to save us. And, just more as an historical note, even though I do think Ron Paul did have some good policy positions, I never did vote for the guy because I understood the great man fallacy back then. Although, unfortunately, because of this Donald Trump mess that's going to be ongoing, I have to say, Alex, I kind of miss Ron Paul because, it's kind of like at least there was something there. But unfortunately, as you and I have mentioned in previous podcasts, how did the supporters of Ron Paul, many of them, go from Ron Paul to Donald Trump in just 4 short years? What kind of, shall I say, controlled schizophrenia had to occur in order for that to happen? And the best answer I can come up with is people believe in political crusading. They believe in working inside of the system in order to change it from within. And I used to do that for many, many years, going like better part of a decade back. And in many ways, Ron Paul broke me of that because I recognized that if he couldn't get his party's nomination, then that was kind of that. I mean, hell, last politician I voted for was Deborah Medina in the Texas gubernatorial. That was in 2010. And I had my Linda Smith moment, recognized that political crusading is not how one gets their freedom. Hell, my first book was all about why political crusading doesn't work for anybody to help them secure their liberties regardless of their specific ideology. And so, yeah, if people just choose to not support these colossi, and just recognize, hey, I have to take responsibility for my own life and presumably for my loved ones, at least to some extent. And so, it's about time I take some direct action of one kind or another, whether it's things like what you're doing in terms of like living off the grid or some other methods, and just kind of, that's kind of where it is, right? It really is taking responsibility for for your own self-determination and not relying on the bureaucracy of any sort of or central planning to kind of make your life better. And so I think once people break themselves of that, as you put it, as that spell, which is a good way of putting it, once they break themselves of that, then in some ways, like Boadi said, they are at once freed. And in a lot of ways, it really is that simple. Not to get too spiritual here either, but a lot of people misunderstand Lucifer. Non serviam, I think, is really the way to go.
Okay, what is that?
Well, essentially, there was the old biblical story about, Saint Michael the Archangel versus Lucifer or Satan, and their battle cries were serviam and non-serviam. I will serve and I will not serve. And unfortunately, that's been twisted by a lot of religious dogmatism because, of course, the priest class of various religions wanted their flocks to, divine right of kings. It goes back to monarchy, actually, historically speaking. And basically that story got so twisted that people kind of falsely believed that if they wanted to be good moral people, they had to obey the king. They had to obey the archons, the rulers. And if anybody was being really honest, if they do want their liberty, they have to refuse consent to be governed. And that's where non-serviam comes in. It has nothing to do with evil. In fact, actually, if anything, good and evil were inverted in that story, if anybody was being really honest. And so I think that if people were seriously to resolve themselves to, I will not serve this system, I'm not going to support its wars, I'm not going to advocate for the welfare state, I'm not going to support the police. I mean, look, Alex, much like how Henry Thoreau put it in Walden, great book, by the way, people should read it. There are thousands of people hacking at the branches of evil to one who is striking at the root. And most people, even most activists, are not root strikers. Because unfortunately, most activists don't the problem with most activism is that most activists don't even understand what the problem is. And until they do, and we can talk honestly about that, which is what I've been trying to do for the past couple of years, then nothing is really kind of developed in a good way. People will kind of spin their wheels.
A hated group, the protesters. Oh, those Soros, kill them. They've been like dehumanized, like the Muslims have been dehumanized, and so that's concerned me as well. The widespread and how is it not potentially Russian propaganda? When also, I want to continue on with what what you're saying, but to throw in with earlier with regards to Russia, they were putting out the disinformation that Obama and Soros were behind all the protests in Russia. And there was a lot of information to say that Putin stole that election in 2011. And so the way they responded to those protests then, the exact way to a T, word for word, replacing Putin protests with Trump protests, blaming the same human, George Soros, who's probably Trump's friend on top of it, playing his role, ha ha ha, and saying just enough. Who knows? Soros might be playing along with this whole thing, you know. And he and Trump are going back and forth with Hillary in the back room. Now I'm not trying to get dirty, but I mean when it really comes down to it, Hillary and Trump probably have had sexual relations, cigars and everything.
You know,
it's definitely gonna.
I wouldn't be surprised about much of anything. I know some of the news cycle lately has been focusing on the so-called Pizzagate, but you know, if anything, I think your explanation you just mentioned makes a lot more sense to me.
Well, there are people calling this as a psyops that are all commentators, and there was Richie from Boston who did a video. A lot of people like his stuff, and he tends to call out some of these psyops as well. I think he commented on my work after seeing the Burns Oregon psyop series, and I think his channel has grown quite a bit, and he's doing quite well. So he's been calling out the Pizzagate psyops. So left can come out and go, see, this is more of that fake news crap. And what they do is they take something that seems real, and it gets so tabloid. And I'll just say that I don't claim to know everything. I've made mistakes myself, but there's something about me in fake news. It's like smelling something that you don't want to smell, and so it's like I don't click on it. It's like I can tell it's fake news without even looking at the actual source, just the way some of the things are titled. And so, yeah. With regards to Pizzagate, following on the heels of Hillary Clinton, the Whore of Babylon, and the whole slew of Bill Clinton rape victims that came, there's definitely something very strange about that. But I'll also mention on a side note, I have this video called Creepy Joe Biden Puts Hands on Children, which you've probably seen.
Yes, I have.
And why Joe Biden is doing that in front of cameras, I mean, I don't see how he would not know there's cameras around. I don't believe that he just can't control himself. And it's just, you know, yes, he may be a pedophile, but why are they putting it out there in plain sight? So the media establishment and whatever's going on with Facebook and the fake news, they're definitely playing up this whole America the Great Satan, a bunch of pedophile. This might be a part of a grander dehumanization campaign of all Americans. It just seems that we are just being brought down to nothingness with pathetic leaders. And Freeman's talked about this. He says, you know, he's been talking about this for multiple decades, about the grand conspiracy to destroy faith in our leaders, to pave the way for a new world order. So, again, we fast forward all these theories after all these years, and we look straight at this dude named Donald Trump. After years of people warning us about Russia, now Russia, good. I honestly believe, Kyle, they really are playing a huge role in steering alternative media. And I believe Alex Jones is a Russian agent, and that Russia is a part of the New World Order. We just don't see it yet because they've worked really hard. And I don't expect you to believe that or my audience to believe that. But I think that we should keep looking at the possibility of that, you know. Going back to that PDF, you should read it because, you know, they're simply using a bit of logic and reason for their own propaganda. And what they're saying is often with these Russian propaganda sites, you'll see a copy-paste of the actual Kremlin talking points with no attribution. And so that's a way that somebody who might be just not very professional, right? I'm just going to copy-paste someone else's work. Well, they should probably know that that doesn't look really good to people that are on the Russian propaganda witch hunt. You know, if you're going to claim that's your work at hangthebankers.com or Zero Hedge, or, you know, we can name another website that's in the syndicate. But the truth is there really are websites that are doing nothing but echoing each other's links. And the fact is we, the real free media, should, especially those that consider themselves non-statists, should be able to take a step back and kind of see this infiltration of our communities towards this pro-Donald, pro-Putin. And if you question it, you love Clinton. And just how they did this whole if you question it, you love Clinton or you're a Clinton voter. I mean, this is really
Well, if anybody was being really honest, I mean, you're basically describing the so-called alt-right, aren't you? Because they're the ones that support Trump, and unabashedly so. You know, they're the ones that are basically supporting this resurgence of mercantilism. They're the ones who basically either never supported Ron Paul or have become controlled schizophrenics in these intervening past, since the last election cycle. I mean, that's what it kind of is. So I think the connection between the provably fake news and the alt-right, I think, is more causative, not even correlational. If you have people who basically are supporting statism, they're supporting these authoritarian policies of some of which you mentioned, which either registering people based on their religion or even, as John Oliver has correctly described, the government boondoggle of a wall on the southern border, which, by the way, is not free market. I mean, I think that's just kind of par for the course. And so anybody who has an understanding of political history, anybody probably more importantly, who actually understands actual economics, real market dynamics, can kind of just look at all of this and go, wow, okay, that's what this is about. This has nothing to do with our freedoms. This certainly has nothing to do with constitutional law. And it has everything to do with the raw exercise of political power in order to push specific agendas benefiting very specific special interests, which, by the way, Ron Paul was all against, rather than any sort of populist anything. And until people get that through their heads, that the alt-right really is controlled opposition, if anybody was being truly honest, then I think people could really realize what's going on here.
There definitely seems to be a connection between the controlled alt-right. Some people are they don't like the term alt-right, and they just say, it doesn't exist, man. It's like calling me the N-word. Okay. Well, apparently there are people like Milo from Breitbart that have been associated with founding the alt-right, which does have this association with an unhealthy obsession with white genocide. Anyway, co-opting of the alternative media aspects of it to be kind of this alt-right thing, this spin-off, and the comparisons that can be drawn to the cast of characters in Burns, Oregon. And then segueing to Burns, Oregon, in the case there, we look at, these people are victims. Well, maybe the Hammonds were, but we take a look at the people that were very much involved in the whole thing. And we talked about a lot of this before, but having talked about the co-opting the liberty movement with Donald Trump, with the cherry on the sundae, providing an update with what's going on with, Burns, Oregon, we've seen the Bundys. They will not guilty in Oregon. I guess they're on their way to Nevada. Pete Santilli, not guilty, on his way to Nevada. I don't know what's going on down there. A lot of people have been given the sense, we won. Let's get ready for the next one. And
well, even if it was a victory, which I think is extremely debatable, and I wish someone would agree to a moderated debate with me about that, because I think it's a good topic to debate on. If we had like proper rules and such, much like that other debate I did recently about the so-called peaceful parenting, which is its own nightmare by itself. I wish people would, or anybody would, be willing to debate me on that, because I think it would be good for the listeners to kind of hear, both sides of the story, like two different arguments, rather than just hearing only one side of it. But I would like to take a moment and update the listeners, if you don't mind, with the latest informants that have been exposed. Because remember, there was 15 of them or something?
Right.
Like that?
There was 15 of them. They put a court order to keep them, their names omitted. There was one mentioned, but there wasn't anything really juicy on the one guy mentioned. I looked up his name. Nothing really exciting. Like, hey, I remember that guy. He was like a guy that we never really see or saw on the Pete Santilli show. But it was one guy that was teaching firearms training, and they were using evidence from Blaine Cooper's cell phone video of people training on a range being taught by this guy. Anyways, so there's more informants that are being that they've announced. Okay.
Well, actually, it's by one of our fellow citizen journalists who've been exposing it in his series called Burns Chronicles, and he doesn't deal with fake news. He's actually very much against it. He's written about that something like that in the past, but he's actually been systematically, and I've been encouraging him to do this, he's been systematically going down and getting the court transcripts out of the trial there, and then following up and further exposing these guys, putting faces to names literally in his article. So the list of exposed informants thus far is as follows. Alan Varner, alias Wolf, Dennis Dickinson, a.k.a. Dennis Jones, Fabio Menaggio, a.k.a. John Kilman, Terry Linnell, a.k.a. Mama Bear. She's an interesting one. I do want to mention her in more length in a moment. And let's see, anybody else? Oh, and of course, the infamous Mark McConnell. Remember, Mark McConnell was the one driving the Jeep that Ammon Bundy was in. And it was on that same day when Lavoy Finicum was gunned down. So, I think that's all the current people that have been exposed. So that's roughly about half a dozen or so. And,
oh, wait, sorry to interrupt. We've also learned that people will follow people with incredibly poor judgment, even if they're not fed. Summing up this point real quick. Doesn't matter how poor judgment Mr. Bundy has used. Logistically, snacks, goodies, bring it to us. We need it. Come on up. We're a big, happy family. As if he has no concern about being infiltrated. I mean, these people's brains are turning to butter. We're trying to help the zombies. We really are. We're not trying to be mean, but there's something going on with consciousness that's manifested in a type of situation where they're not able to detect people that could lead them into a bloodbath, that could lead people literally into a slaughter, into a prison. And we're not seeing accountability on the part of those, including Mark Passio of what on earth is happening, getting on Facebook one day in all caps, screaming profanities at anyone that wasn't going up to Burns, Oregon, and say, well, that motherfucker from Philadelphia who's going to scream about the Dominators and how he's the ultimate philosopher. And I just have to point this out, Kyle, screaming on the top of his lungs on Facebook in caps how we're pussyfied. We're backing down to the stage. Yeah. By not getting on part of something that was highly hijacked. And I think fans of Mark Passio listening to the sound of my voice should rethink just letting that dude just program you into his way of thinking, because he obviously doesn't have it all figured out.
Well, you're correct in saying in so much as that there was a lot of guilt tripping during this past January, especially over the internet about, if you essentially, it was along the lines of, if you care about freedom, you should go essentially martyr yourself, at least in some sense, with the fools who are squatting at a birdcage, essentially is what it was. And unlike what would probably be fairly considered, at least used to be a victory at Bundy Ranch, what is undeniable is that there was no victory at the Malaheur Refuge. So whatever gains that were made at the Bundy Ranch is basically nunc pro tunc. It's essentially reversed because, and in large part because, remember, Cliven Bundy got picked up at, I think it was the Portland airport, I think it was. So that, and a lot of people kind of forget that. And and last time I checked, he's still incarcerated, by the way, because of the upcoming trials in February, with both the remaining C4CF defendants in Oregon, plus the parallel trial of the events in Nevada, that's the one I actually care about, because now they're actually going to go to court over what happened in Bunkerville a few years ago. One thing I would like to mention in passing, Terry Linnell was an interesting informant. She ended up testifying not for the prosecution, but actually for the defense. And as best as I can tell, there seems to be some indications that her testimony on behalf of the Citizens for Constitutional Freedom defendants actually may have led to the acquittals. So that's kind of its own interesting story. Why would Linnell basically betray her handlers? Because if I remember correctly, I think her agency I think it was the Bureau. I think it was the FBI, if I remember correctly. So, and also one other side note too, some people have kind of made the remark about what's the modern day equivalent of like your 30 pieces of silver. And it's interesting, with Linnell, I think she was paid something on the order of about $3,000 plus expenses. And that kind of reminds me of a different case, not related to Oregon, but regarding a guy who's still behind bars. His name's Skylar Barbeau. He was actually ratted out by an informant who has been exposed by Oliver Murphy, and I think he was paid about the same amount, about I don't know about expenses, but definitely about $3,000. So there's already two case studies in recent in our contemporary time period within the past 2 years or so, where these or at least two informants, two different cases, were essentially paid about $3,000. So there's kind of been a little bit of joke for those of us who kind of keep a close eye on these things in the Patriot movement, where essentially the modern day 30 pieces of silver is roughly 3,000 Federal Reserve notes. So that's kind of where that's at. A little bit of joke about inflation, at least to some degree, right? Times 100, right? Okay, anyway, but a little bit of an economics joke. But yeah, I mean that kind of seems to be the case. So Oliver Murphy and the other informants that were more specific to Oregon really are bad guys, like Menaggio, Dickinson, McConnell, and Varner. Linnell is kind of odd. In some ways, it's almost as if I'm sorry about the biblical references, but it's almost like she's like the good thief on the cross. Like, she's bad, but it's almost like she had like a spark of conscience and then testified for the defense. But I don't know. I guess that's getting a little speculative. But yeah, the fact of the matter is, though, that about a handful of the informants have been outed, which is good. But then that kind of begs the question, well, what about the remaining ones? And I guess in due time, at least some of them will be outed. But I think it kind of just serves as an object lesson that when you have these grandstanding, dare shall I say, martyrdom operations, but at least these grandstanding, whatever the hells, I mean, they're not, listen, people, these folks are not vetting their own personnel. They're just not doing it. And
come on down, bring up some Slim Jims, we'll be all good.
Right. And not only that, sorry, one other thing I want to mention too, in passing, I just remembered this. Linnell was interesting too, because she actually finger pointed Bruce Doucette as actually being at the refuge, and she actually had, and she claimed, if we're going to take her word for it to be fair, she actually was rebuffing him. And because he was trying to kind of, he had two fake U.S. Marshals with him, apparently, according to her. So, there's that little connection as well.
And again, we have no pictures. We have stories. We have the Oregonian. I think they took a picture maybe of Bruce Doucette. There is video of Bruce Doucette kind of trying to get away from Pete Santilli, though, while Pete Santilli was doing his stream. And who knows what that was all about. But Pete Santilli's like, hey, sir, I want to talk to you. And, Bruce Doucette's kind of like, he's flying away. And you were telling me a story. Did you want to share that about a man that was down there that, was describing Bruce Doucette's. And again, for those that don't know, we're talking about a fake judge who's pretending to be a judge, who's infiltrating off-grid communities, patriot communities, and he's promoting this continental common law, Continental Congress, United States. He's not a real judge. He has no backing, but he's hypnotized people. We've done podcasts on it. Check it out. Seems to be a potential government operation, or the dude is really eccentric. I don't really see how – we've already talked about this, man. I don't see how somebody would do that as a hobby. And we don't know who Bruce Doucette is before this last year. And I don't know what he's up to right now. You'll have to let us know. But go ahead and tell us that story. And the guy's trying to document – Bruce is trying to document people's names on paper.
Well,
or some sort of a blood oath almost. It sounded like sign your name in blood, or what was it?
Yeah, there was. I think I did mention this before. There were basically the fake oaths, right? They were trying to essentially trick people into signing in red ink these various documents. And I don't know, man. It's just kind of, honestly, I can't recall the details right offhand, but suffice to say, it was essentially a scam. And this is part and parcel of the so-called oxymoronic, sovereign citizenship movement of sorts, is that it's basically just trying to get people to, part with whatever remaining Federal Reserve notes they have. But of course, at the same time, they're actually doing the work of the federal government for them. even if it is genuine, and they're, because they're essentially, they're either useful idiots or they're controlled opposition. And unfortunately, when you have someone like a Bruce Doucette or an Anna von Reitz, and by the way, she hates me, by the way, but that's its own separate story. It's just kind of like, look, anytime you rain in on anybody's parade, and you simply point out, kind of like with Trump, or the Trump supporters anyway, and say, hey, there's some serious problems with this, of course they're going to despise you, and there's going to be all sorts of vitriol and such. I mean, hell, like I kind of mentioned earlier with that moderated debate I had, the peaceful parents want my head on a pike now too. Different story for another time. So it's very interesting. All of these so-called activists, whether it's the sovereign citizens, the Trump supporters, the peaceful parents, or anybody else for that matter, anytime anybody tries to basically point out, hey, there's some serious problems here, can we at least, discuss it publicly? No, you're evil is pretty much the response. So yeah, regarding Doucette and the signing of the blood oaths or whatever, I mean, there hasn't really been much follow-up with that. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff has gone dark. There actually has been kind of a media blackout of sorts. Because unfortunately, as you remember when my fake judges article came out, people thought I was lying. So even though everything was documented and sourced and all that, and all people have to do is go click on the hyperlinks and actually see the fake oaths for themselves and so forth. So that's kind of where it's at. There's a lot of scams. There's a lot of deception. Whether it takes the form of the sovereign citizens or it takes the form of donating to a billionaire's political campaign. Because remember, there are the donation buttons on Trump's website. So that's just kind of where it's at, man. It's just that, yeah, Terry Linnell did finger point, if we are to believe her, and she is an admitted informant, so just take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, she did claim that Doucette was trying to get people to sign up to basically something kind of like one of those phony citizens grand jury things, kind of like what happened in Costilla County. It was kind of like all of that all over again. And yeah,
cool. Well, for anyone listening, if you want to learn more, I just want to throw in, they can just Google and hear our podcast discussing it, or see your written work at thelastbastille.com, the fake judge articles, and how the Liberty movement really dropped the ball on Costilla County. And, in a day and age, again, for people that have never listened to our podcast before that are finding this, in a day and age where people talk about white genocide and all this, we documented a racist county in Colorado that kicked off white off-gridders that I was supporting because they have a right to live on the land that they own. And instead of the people, instead of Donald Trump, instead of Alex Jones, instead of any of these motherfuckers doing any videos, they'll get up and they'll tap dance for Burns when it's time, right, or Bundy if it's popular. But when you actually had a real situation where the Liberty movement should have swarmed on, said no. Instead, I don't want to use the word punishment. I think the people just should have mass migrated to Costilla County to teach them a lesson. You don't screw with people in their livelihood and put people in a near cardiac arrest when they're senior citizens, and have a young punk walk up with a hand on his gun or her gun, so you have 10 days to get off. That's immoral, and that's subject for a response from the people. Oh, you want to push us out? We're calling our brothers and sisters, and you're gonna have to take us all. Oh, hey, what a place for an Occupy. I'm not big for Occupy, but if there ever was a movement for the people to come together, for the left and the right, and I'm sorry, there's no cattle involved, but you know what? You can go buy some hamburgers. You can still have a barbecue, and hell, bring the Rainbow Family Gathering. Hell, put them all on one plot of land. See how that shit works out. But have a left-right freedom movement with their own understanding of freedom, and there'll be a little of skirmishes. Burning Man has this. Yeah, Burning Man has a thing. I haven't been there, but I've seen video where they joust. They have the people pull them back with these rubber bands, and they release these devices, and then it just brings them, bam, and they hit each other, and then they start jousting. So anyway, long story short, people can learn from Costilla County, because that would be a time for people to not worship a demigod, and if they're really concerned about whites being persecuted. You had a clear case where people should have done something, and lawyers could have got involved, And it seems like, I wouldn't want to see a white supremacist lawyer get involved. I wouldn't want to see really the Oath Keepers come out there. But the fact of the matter is, all we got were people like Bruce Doucette and another guy They came across more as federal provocateurs than regular dudes. And what we're telling you is that you can all learn something from this. Kyle, in the last few minutes, I mean, what are your hopes or fears or predictions? I mean, are you feel confident enough making any predictions with what we're going to see from Donald Trump or the Liberty Movement or any other new hybrid twists? You know, we've gotten the Donald Trump Putin twist. Do you think that we're going to see any other weird twists with the alternative media? A lot there, but where do you think we go from here?
Well, I did write an article fairly recently which was titled Against the Alt-Right. And so I tried to make a unique case, which I haven't seen anybody else make, which is basically that the alt-right is essentially filled with neoconservatives, and it's not something that people with a conscience should really support, and I explained why. As far as like predictions or something to that effect, I'll kind of echo here what I wrote in that article. I think there is a question about the beginning, is the alt-right the beginning of the end of the alternative media? I don't particularly care about Trump's public policy in one sense because he's going to do whatever he's going to do, and if it does end up, affecting people, we'll deal with that at the time when it comes. And who knows, it may actually involve counter-economic activity in terms of things like, I don't know, maybe smuggling people out of the country. But again, we'll come to that bridge when we cross it. For now, though, what I would say the more important issue would be, what about the alternative media? What's that future going to look like? And so when you got the ball rolling on that, I think it was that hashtag free media, I think you're kind of doing a good thing there, Alex, because for all intents and purposes, this fake news phenomenon coupled with the alt-right, pretty much the evidence does suggest, and maybe it's too early to tell to be fair, because I do try to take the long view of history in mind, but at least currently in the present, at least as of this moment in November of 2016, it would seem that the alternative media is dead. And I take absolutely no pleasure in saying that. I think there is a chance to maybe revitalize the soapbox, because as people have pointed out, there's the ballot box, the jury box, the soapbox, the pine box, and of course the ammo box. And I think it's in our interest, our own individual interest, to try and make the soapbox work as much as possible so that we don't have to resort to the ammo box or end up in a pine box. And so I do think that anytime people are willing to produce content, people are willing to, if they're going to chase down stories and be a good citizen journalist, they actually go not rely on fake news, but instead get the original source documents. Go and actually conduct interviews with people if you're trying to chase down a story, much like what you did with Costilla County. If they're going to follow a court case, get the original court documents like Gary Hunt's been doing for his Burns Chronicles series, which is why he's been able to out the informants. Whatever it all is, people really need to, take journalism seriously. And then kind of speaking almost on the other side of that, I think having the long view of history is important. So if people actually go back to some books that were written either late last century or even before then, and really kind of, at least my observations have been, people really, you start really, at least I've been realizing that in some ways what you've mentioned about history being more, not so linear, but more cyclical in some ways. I'm really kind of starting to believe that. There's that old thing called the Tytler cycle of history, and kind of passing through these different stages of going from apathy to dependence to bondage to spiritual awakening to courage to liberty to prosperity, but then kind of devolving again into degeneracy and really more kind of ultimately leading back to people's emotional attitudes towards wealth kind of corrupts their morals in some ways, if they allow it to, which then ultimately leads back to apathy and then straight back into bondage. So,
and right now where we are, I think we're in the cycle of the soul seeking, and with specific references to creating content, writing. I see periods in which there's just more people are expressing more of their gift of communication, whether we agree with them or not. They're creating more content. They're more active. So just in line with that cyclical kind of interpretation, I see the next couple of years as major years to really recenter on our roots. Independent media, free media. It's almost as if there's a resurgence of truly independent thought every cycle, and that we're in a part of that cycle to where people are like, okay, well, what is true again? How do we get back to our roots? Man, we've just been co-opted big time. and I think the establishment social engineers are aware of this stuff too, and they use it to their benefit.
Yeah.
I just think that people, they jump to conclusions that it's just Soros and that they're just operating one way, and that they really hate Donald Trump and they really love Clinton. And I think that they've overlooked, and if we recenter it, see, I want to make this announcement now. The dailymatrix.com is my website. So is worldwarzero.com, which is more geopolitics. Then there's offgridco.com. Then there's the Solar Flare website. But I want to bring all 4 websites, which are kind of independent of my personality, on alexansary.tv, and share those websites with others to promote other people's content. And I'm going to be doing a lot of that in the next few days to weeks to months, starting with the Daily Matrix. So, if there are people out there that have like an anti-statist position and they want to analyze geopolitics, it's not that I'm censoring you. It's that we have enough pro-statist Russian lovers, and we really don't need any more of that right now. We could show that there really is an alternative media, free media, that can operate outside those Putin talking points. And so I want to work with a team of other writers. Send me your content. And I think that's one way that I'm going to push back. I'm going to use this period that we're in with this kind of, backlash against aspects of the alternative media to create something different that's not co-opted by those very things. The fact of the matter is some people left themselves open to be co-opted, and so people are going to be mad. People are going to be real mad at those people that helped promote Donald Trump. And as I and Kyle, but, I was actually saying that I think it'd be bad for white people. I actually use those words. And so when I see the video of the 4 black guys beating that guy's head in, no, that guy did not deserve to have his head beat in for voting Trump. I'm not suggesting that. I'm seeing those people as all being like robots. Even that dude doesn't realize that Trump is setting him up. So he's in a bad part of town with a front. Right now we're seeing Trump vehicles torched. What's wrong with these people? These people sit there with their Mercedes. I don't know, like what is it, the cocaine or what? Like they just have too much money. Like look at Portland, Oregon. They torched a Jeep. So like really nice vehicles with like Trump bling bling. Kiss it, biatch. I'm rich, biatch. I don't know what these people think they're doing, but they're doing that, Kyle. They think they can run around going, I'm rich, biatch. I'm 6 foot, blah, blah, blah. Look at my fucking Barbie. And this Barbie girl gets punched by some black thug. And they're like, oh, I didn't see this coming. Yeah, because you're an idiot.
Yeah.
You should see this coming. Donald Trump set you up. And I think that's the most important message we're trying to drive home. It's like oh, man, I'm going to throw out the prediction. It's called the Trump voter supporter hack, where they just dump all the fucking names and addresses of those that voted Trump. And the reason why I'm telling you that is because I'm seeing how some people on the other side are playing the other psyops, like James David Manning. I like the fact they called out Obama and then they called out Trump. But now you're saying Jesus is coming back to kill all the white people that voted Trump. That's some terrorizing apocalyptic shit that I wouldn't necessarily endorse, telling a so-called Christian following that Jesus is going to come back. He'll kill ya. He'll kill ya. Yo, mocked. And so it's really unfortunate to see him because I can see people responding to that. And it's more this race war back and forth.
Yeah, I can appreciate why you think that at some point the Trump voters might find themselves doxxed, or at least some portion thereof. And, quite frankly, considering what some bloggers have referred to as the deep state, basically the intelligence agencies, I really wouldn't be surprised by anything. I don't trust the institution of government at all. I don't care what the form of government is. And so, yeah, if they were to play dirty tricks with their own citizenry like that, because if anybody's being really honest, the several American governments have committed democide again already. The police killings are just part of that. And so, if you have a government that is already on record for committing democide, then why wouldn't they stoop to other things like doxing particular voters? Yes, but why wouldn't they do that? I mean, if straight up murder in plain daylight that is captured on film, something like an Eric Garner, but not limited to that, or other people. I'm also thinking of kind of like Donald Scott back in the 90s, or Oscar Grant, or Jose Guanera, or any of these guys who have just been flat out murdered by police and other government agents. It's just kind of thinking like, okay, if these statists, these government employees, are willing to do these horrendous crimes that if you and I did, oh boy, death penalty time, wouldn't it? But no, these guys walk. They walk. So is it really hard to imagine for anybody that, yeah, maybe there could be some sort of clandestine operation to set up the Trump supporters for a fall in terms of like having their personally identifiable information doxxed, legal names, physical addresses, telephone numbers, the whole shish kabang, social security numbers. Ooh, that would be fun too if that got doxxed.
Adult Friendly Finder is like a sex swingers website, and apparently there was a data dump of that with 300 million swingers with all their info and their kink stuff. All that's out there. And then we go back a month or two, and then we see all these phones that were hacked out of China that were like the Androids. And then we saw the PayPal thing. So there's like a series of these weird data things that just on the side that have been building and building and building. So that's partly where that projection comes from. It's like these data dumps or whatever seem to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And then we have these false flag Assanges or, questionable characters that are in the news, or groups like Anonymous, where it's like, oh my God, how can that actually be a legitimate group of the people when it's called Anonymous? I mean, that's just asking for trouble.
Yeah.
To get involved with people that are just, I'm anonymous, but you can trust me because I got a Guy Fawkes mask. One more thing, what we can see about the, as we wind down here, a very important long podcast, please share this with other people out there that need to be unplugged, because our podcasts are unplugging people. And that's the most important thing. People may laugh at it now. I'll tell you what, Kyle, yeah, have I mentioned this? Nobody's trolling for Trump on my page. Holy crap. I don't think I've told anybody this. It's been like a week or two since anybody went pro-Trump. No one said Trump 2016.
Really?
So I don't know what's going on. Whether the troll army just shifted a narration, because I do think there are troll armies out there that are just out there to spit a narrative or algorithms. No, ain't nobody defending Trump on my page. All they do is thumb down, if that. Most people are thumbing up on some of the critical things. Some people just thumb down because they're bored. It's just what they do. But so what have we learned from Trump? We've learned that, first of all, Clinton, or anyone demonized as much as Clinton, can literally bring the directors, the voters, to the other side. And even if the people don't really vote for that, they can make it really popular with social media and fake news. But Clinton won't call out the fake news when it's actually happening. She'll call out the alt-right like at the end of the campaign. So it's like, and look who it's coming from. It's coming from Hillary Clinton. Who's going to trust her? Look at the Clinton cash. Look at all the dead bodies behind Clinton. Oh my God, Pizzagate, the little girls. Oh my God, the little girls. Creepy Joe Biden kissing the kids. So we can see how they can push everything in the direction of Trump and make him seem like the only one. At the same time, as much as people hate George Bush, and as much as people have railed against the neocons for 10 years, because they built up all this, now Trump can line up all these neocons, and they got nothing to say. They will not speak against, I'm going to choose my words carefully. It's like I want to say they're white devil. I'm sorry. I mean, that's what it is. And some people call him Chucky. And on the other hand, you have people that preach racism against white people, which I don't agree with, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And I actually downloaded and watched a recent interview with him on Donahue. So he was screaming about, South Africa, kill the babies, kill the women, kill. And even though Trump doesn't say that, it's like, they are two different sides of the same coin. Judge them, ban them, deport them, and these types of things, racially profile them, judge them all. And that's where I see that parallel. And unfortunately, to some black people, they respond to that type of rhetoric. And to some white people, they respond to that type of rhetoric of division. And it's sad that there are people that have voted Trump that have denied that he's promoted the illusions of separation. But we're going to continue to narrate this as America begins to transform, or should I say deform, as a result of the Trump presidency. And we'll continue to throw in our projections and predictions. And like I said, Trump may, again, just start something that some other president inherits in 4 years or after a few months or a few years, if they're going to, in fact, stage the assassination of Trump. So Trump can actually go hang out with Hitler and they can have have some umbrella drinks on the beach in South America.
Jeez. Yeah, I can probably see that happening too. So, yeah, man. I mean, I think that's kind of the idea here is that, when you have these fake news outlets basically pushing their own agendas and all that, I would also consider people to kind of look at a lot of the claims being made and consider the possibility, as I've written about before, that maybe they're promoting a bunch of fake grievances, one of which being like, well, the Muslim invasion, right? It's kind of like, just because there were a few isolated shootings last year, whether it was Chattanooga, whether it was actually right here in Texas, or some other ones, that doesn't therefore mean it was an invasion. So, just saying.
One more point about that. It seems that the fake news wave, when it comes with some of that, is timed with certain other headlines in the news. So there was the headline about the Muslim database that the immigration advisor is proposing as soon as Trump comes in and the guy's appointed. And they're talking about immediately doing that. And so, and he goes on Megyn Kelly of Fox News to discuss that. Meanwhile, on Fox News, all of a sudden, boom, the fake news profiles are back, pushing that. And I'm going, I wonder if those are coordinated together. And so I don't know this to be fact. Again, I've called for people to write at my websites, but actually for people to do a closer examination, the same way that Pro or Not did a 32-page PDF where they highlighted Russian propaganda, but they used an argument really to demonize anybody that just happens to go along with the Kremlin talking points. They didn't actually prove shit. Well, I think we should actually prove and document the real fake news that does exist. We write down their websites, and we indicate, and we show, and we do the real first fake news report. Kyle, if you want to tackle that in your next, I'll help you with that. If other readers want to get involved, but there is an actual list, a top 10 that you can draw up. And actually show to the mainstream and alternative media and go, these motherfuckers are paying these people to be subhumans, literally. And some people are too stupid to realize it's fake. That's the fake news. Talk about it.
Yeah, and just as a parting thought, thought here, I remember years ago, I actually was doing a podcast with a colleague of mine, and one of the, I guess you could call it a fake news story that we were debunking was, remember Paul Joseph Watson, who's now like a darling of the alt-right? Well, he was the one that actually wrote the fake story about the post office torture rooms, if you remember that one from years back. And basically, me and the other guy, we went kind of line by line and looked at the diagram. And because in part because he was a former land surveyor, he was kind of explaining more precisely why the dimensions of the schematics that were offered in the article and such were kind of bogus. That there wouldn't be enough room for the torturer and the torturee, the victim basically. There wouldn't even be enough room for both of them to be in there. Or at best, even if they were, the torturer would himself be tortured because he would have to be bending over constantly because of the staircase. So yeah, I mean, I'm fairly comfortable with debunking things and such. But yeah, this has been kind of a long-standing problem, except it is getting worse. I will say that much.
Well, it's a story we'll come back to. Okay, so we've covered quite a bit. Any last thoughts regarding Trump or anything not yet mentioned?
I would just simply reiterate that, if people want to be free, they really just have to, non serviam, I will not serve. And there are plenty of ways to do that legally, which be covered at another time, that don't entail counter-economic activity. That might put you at risk of being a political prisoner. There's all sorts of methods for doing that, and I think what's good about your example is that you're showing people in a more day-to-day type sense that you don't have to live in a subdivision, you don't have to live in an apartment, you don't have to live in the cities or even suburbs. You can go out and live in a more rural area and really make a go of it. And if people were willing to, shall I say, change their lifestyles in such a way where they are automatically more independent, I think in a lot of ways that they can solve a lot of whatever real grievances that they do have, kind of in that kind of change.
I appreciate those thoughts. We'll definitely come back and continue sharing on these podcasts this Liberty Intelligence File broadcast, myself and Kyle Reardon, for November 30th, 2016.